Secrets, the podcast, part of the Volume Podcast Network. I am Chad Millman of the Action Network. Today, I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, my companion, my compadre, my BFF, professional bettor, Simon Hunter. Hello, Simon.
Hello, Chad. How we doing?
I am so psyched for today's episode, which came together quickly because it's very rare that you get an opportunity in which the entire world's attention is on a singular event. In this case, electing the new pope and the conclave that is happening right now. And it also happens to coincide with a massive worldwide historic betting market. But that's what we have today. Right now, the biggest betting event in the world is trying to figure out how you can make money off of who is going to be the next pope. And by the way, this goes back 5 centuries. People have been betting on who will be the next pope going back to the early 1500s. I cannot wait to discuss this with you, Simon, and have everybody find out what your confirmation name was. But we're going to bring in our guest because it is incredibly difficult to really understand and handicap who the next pope is going to be. So, our very own Judas, a man who walked away from action, joined the Ringer, and today has a fantastic story up on the Ringer called Who Wants the Smoke? Trying to predict the unpredictable Papal Conclave. A man who calls himself the Holy Trinity of Italian American, Catholic, and gambler. Welcome back to the show, Anthony Dabbundo.
I'll be honest, I did not expect to be called back to talk about the Papal Conclave. And if you had told me that 2 weeks ago, even 4 days ago, I probably would have laughed at you. But I'm happy to be here, excited to break down this incredible event that really we only get a handful of times in our entire lives.
This is probably the second one for you and Simon.
Third.
Right,
Yeah.
third one. So I guess this would be the fourth one for me because I was alive when John Paul II got the gig, and then Benedict, and then Francis, and now whoever will be next, which we're going to determine today. I'm super excited because I did not know this until we came on the air. Anthony, Catholic. Simon, Catholic. Matt Mitchell went to Catholic school. Gifford Gould, producer, went to Catholic school. There's one Jew on this show who does not really know anything about Catholicism. So I'm excited to get educated as we talk about this. By the way, don't forget, everybody, at Real Chad Millman, go subscribe. Find lots of content there from the show, other stuff, gambling history, of which this is a core part. You can wager on who the next pope will be at a number of unregulated offshore sports books. We like to keep things legal and above board on this show. We're going to be referencing Kalshi, a prediction market that is legal in all 50 U.S. states, election betting, Fed rate betting, basketball, trading. They call it trading. They don't call it betting. But they actually allow you to buy and sell positions on practically everything newsworthy, from pop culture and news headlines to multiple markets related to the announcement of the next pope. If you haven't signed up for Kalshi yet, use code ACTION at sign up for a $10 bonus. Link to do that quickly and easily is in the description. Build some papal positions. All right. Before we even get to it, let's define your Catholic bona fides here, because we don't want people to think you're being, sacrilegious or inauthentic. Simon, tell us how good a Catholic you really were.
I was not a good Catholic in any sense of the word, but I started going to church like any good '90s family. My parents made me and my three brothers go to church from, I want to say, pre-K. Like they would stick me in this like Sunday classroom until seventh, eighth grade until I got my confirmation, brother. So I went to Sunday mass for, I don't know, 10 straight years, which looking back is insane that this is before cell phones or anything. You just stick some kids on a wooden bench and just be in the most boring place in the world for an hour while people just sing around you. So God bless my parents. But yeah, I got a confirmation name. My name is insane, Chad, because British people, old fashioned, you used to have two middle names. So my full name with my Hunter as last name is Simon Edward Thomas Damien Hunter. So Damien is my confirmation name. There is a Saint Damien out there, and as a little shithead seventh grader, I made that my confirmation name to get back at my teacher, who just, God bless this woman, just would just absolutely hated me. Her name was Mrs. Dickerson. I don't know if she's still around, but obviously with that last name and me being a little smartass, it was a long 8 years of having me in her CCD classes. So yeah, been a Catholic, and still to this day, we still go to the Sunday mass. Like there's two, I would say, people like me who are fake religious people, fake Catholics. We go to Sunday mass and Easter Sunday. Probably haven't been chatting in about 8-10 years. I don't even know, but I have had settled into that someday I might get married and I might have a wife that's like, we gotta go. So if I meet a nice Jew, I'll go to temple. If not, I'll probably be back in the church. So I'm trying to hold out as long as I can till I have to go back, brother.
By the way, since I got two Philly guys with me today, one of my favorite Always Sunnies is, I think it's season one. It's like episode, it could be episode 3, 4, 5, whatever. Almost an entire episode about whether or not you can say the word Jew, or if like all of a sudden that becomes
Offensive. Yeah.
anti-Semitic, which was just a classic episode. All right, Dabbundo, give us your Catholic bona fides so we know that none of us are going to hell. We come to this from an honest, proactive,
Debatable.
positive place.
Debatable. It's definitely not, it's frowned upon by some in the Catholic Church to bet on anything, but especially the papal outcome. But yeah, I went to Catholic school in kindergarten, went to public school for the rest of my education, but I was an altar boy for a few years in kind of, I think it was like 6th and 7th grade. I made my confirmation, all the sacraments, my communion, and maybe one day we'll see. I'll get married in the Catholic Church, but it's a part of my family. It's not a huge part of my family, and so it's something that I kind of comes and goes. My Catholicism, definitely have my fair share of issues with the church we won't get into, but I think that it is a fascinating experience to grow up a Catholic.
Well, in the Bible, I believe it says in some form, I might be paraphrasing here, money is the root of all evil. Am I correct?
Yes.
Altar boys?
Correct. Technically.
So what are we doing here? I feel like we're raising.
It's not
the
even about the
stakes on
money.
going-
It's about
we're
the
raising
fun.
the stakes on going to hell.
That is true. We would have been excommunicated from the church for this if we did it for a period of about 320 years.
Well, thank God. Whatever Pope decided it was okay has modernized the times, and that's really what we're here to talk about today. Will the conclave, will the cardinals, when the white smoke billows, have chosen a pope who is along the progressive and liberal lane that Francis has been on during his reign, which was what, 12 years? Will they go more conservative? Anthony, before we even get into that, your story's great. What did you learn about the history of betting on the Pope that makes us feel better about this?
Yeah, so it starts, and as early as we can tell, dates back to 1503. So in Rome, when they were choosing the new pope, it kind of like if you saw the movie Gladiator 2, where in the movie they're like horse trading on the street, betting on who they think the winner of the gladiator games are going to be. It's similar to that. And that it was kind of how betting worked, where you could have brokers and Roman banking houses that would take bets on who the next pope was going to be. And, back then, it was just always a much smaller process. It wasn't the same, massive conclave that they have now, super secretive. The oath of secrecy has become a newer thing. And so back then, I'm sure there was a lot of insider trading. There was a lot of who knew a guy, who knew a guy, who knew a guy's cousin. But basically, the church decided we really don't want this because in 1591 they said we don't want anybody betting on this. So we are now saying you are excommunicated from the church if you decide you're going to bet on the Pope. But they lifted it in 1918. So we're back, technically.
We're back, baby.
But the reality is it kind of
almost
never
110
left.
years of betting on this Pope.
But it never really left because you can go back to 1903. The Italian government was offering bets on when the sick Pope Leo the 13th would die. So you could literally bet on like, will this guy live for X amount of time? So clearly, like betting on Pope outcomes is something that even when the church didn't like it, it was still happening regardless, which is similar to how betting works on sports in America, right? It happened long before it became legal, but now we just get to talk about it more openly.
It doesn't go away. It just happens somewhere else. That's really the gist of the story for betting and just about every other vice that anyone has ever tried to legislate, eradicate, or control. It's just going to happen. Water finds a crack. That's just how it goes. Simon, give us your take. Is there a wise guy market that you're hearing about amongst all your scumbag Philly friends that is going on for the Pope right now?
Unfortunately, I have not. If those text messages I'm being left out of, like I've heard a little bit about it in some chatter, but that's honestly in my own personal life, not from bettors. So like we just talked about, this is a market that is real, but I don't think it's one that pros dedicate their lives to because like we just said, it's once in every 12 years, could be once every 25 years. It's just such a niche market, but me, Chad, I'll bet on anything. I've done Deadpools before. So like, this is nothing to me. And question for Anthony though is, being on the East Coast, what time do they burn the paper? Like, is it 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock East Coast? Like when does the smoke happen? Is that just a random time every day, or is it a set time that they burn and let us know the black smoke or the white smoke?
Yeah, so they have the first day, which was Wednesday, first day of the conclave. They gather in the evening and they have the first vote. So the first vote already happened as of now. We're recording this Thursday morning. The first vote already happened and it was black smoke. So no new Pope, no 2/3 majority. The second day and every day thereafter, so starting on Thursday, there will be 4 votes per day. 2 in the morning. So they've already happened. We're recording this 11 a.m. It's 5 p.m. in Rome. They've already had the 2 morning votes. Then they'll have the evening votes if necessary. Then after the 4th round of voting, they break for the day. They come back the 3rd day. So we don't know when the smoke will turn white, but it could be as early as tonight, as this afternoon, really, because it'll be around 3-4 o'clock p.m. Eastern, which was yesterday. It was 3 p.m. Eastern that they put out the black smoke. I suspect it'll be around the same time again today. So around 3-4 o'clock Eastern, you'll get the smoke.
So your advice to people listening to this would be, whatever you give out here, try to get to this market and attack it now because it could happen literally today.
Pope Francis was elected on the 2nd day. Okay. Traditionally, it's been longer, but it's gotten shorter as time has gone on. So usually it's like 3 or 4 days. You have to remember, like, you're being sequestered, right? So these cardinals, as much as this sacred process, they don't want to be sitting in the conclave. Yeah. There was a joke about how they're raw dogging it without their phones. Like, they don't want to be doing this for months on end, weeks on end. They want to get to the solution as well. So,
yeah, it's not 1600. There's other things to do now.
Right.
I want to explain a little bit of what Kalshi is so people understand when you're going to play on the platform, what you're really doing. It's essentially a trading platform, and you're trading what are called contracts. You're buying and selling. You're making a bid on a price on a market. You're selling a market. That's how you're operating on these platforms. I think they're fascinating. I think it's the direction a lot of this is going. Everyone should go and check it out. I've played with it a ton. And for the book that I've talked about on the show, I think prediction markets over the next 2 to 3 years are going to become more and more influential. I have no doubts that, especially when we get to a 2028 presidential election, there are analysts on the desks for all the major broadcasts that are looking at what is happening in the election from the perspective of the prediction markets. It's a great source of truth on what people with actual money on the line are doing It cleans up, I think, a lot of the noise from the polling data that is becoming less and less accurate and reliable. So I'm a huge fan of what these platforms are doing. They are now offering a lot of different markets in sports. But like I said, you'll go, you'll check it out. You'll see the Pope. You'll see what's the Fed going to do. You can see markets about what Elon Musk is going to do. You can see markets about Tesla. You can, it's like any market that anyone has a decision on or an opinion on can be posted and then bought and sold. It's really, really fascinating. So, Anthony, in your story, explain how the makeup of the Cardinals has changed during Francis's time, because I do think that's going to have a huge impact on how voting may play out.
Yeah, so you hear about like stacking the courts, packing the courts. Francis did a little bit of conclave cardinal packing. 108 of the 133 members are new and appointed by Francis. So this is their first conclave. So many of these people, they've never met. They've been doing a lot of listening sessions and conversations before the doors were even locked to kind of get to know each other, to get to understand the different factions that are forming. And so this really is incredibly uncertain as a result of that, because it can go two ways. One hand, you could say, hey, they're new, they're more likely to listen to the quote unquote elders. Or you could say they're new, they could want to continue and push the church even further in the progressive direction. And so I think there's a lot of questions about how that will actually manifest itself. But one thing that is certainly true is that the makeup geographically is vastly different than it was 12 years ago. Europe used to be the center of power of the Catholic Church. It still is, but much less now. So Africa has more cardinals than it ever has. South America and Asia all have seen significant increases in their percentage of the vote. And so those voters have more weight now to throw around, whereas it used to just be, all right, Europe would kind of just pick their guy. Usually it was an Italian. We had a German, we had a Polish guy. But now with Francis's election and now his reign, the church is much more worldwide than it used to be. And if they want to continue that, they could end up picking somebody who's not in Europe.
This is where it starts to get interesting. The politics of the church really are in play here, because Francis, as I said at the beginning, has been considered to be a more liberal, more progressive pope. There are players in the church who would like the church to lean more conservative. But to me, in your story, the way you handicapped it, there were only one or two people who really had a chance as conservative sort of backers to become the next pope. Break it down, sort of how the moderate, liberal, conservative factions can influence this.
Yeah, it is hard because the way we think about politics as Americans is inherently a little different than how religious politics work, and then how, like, even in Europe, how that works. Because there's different kinds of theory, right? Because you could be a progressive on certain issues that the church takes up, like how do you feel about mass immigration? How do you feel about climate change, which were things that Francis would be considered very liberal on. But then you could also be more conservative on like the actual Bible, the religious text, the theology of it all. And so you might not see yourself, and you could take multiple different positions. And so I think that's where it gets a little bit tricky when you try to just like line people up on a scale from one to the other. But certainly, like, I think the most conservative front runner is Peter Erdo of from Hungary, who has been a key figure in the conservative bloc. But he's not, like, if you watch the movie, and I made this joke in the movie, like the conservative guy Tedesco, I don't know if you've seen Conclave, but he's like this very like loud, bombastic, like my way or the highway type. That is not really how Erdo is characterized. He's seen as kind of a consensus builder. And so we've seen a rightward shift along a lot of political institutions in Europe, especially. Elections have gone the way of right-wing parties, but this is not an election of like your average Catholic voter. This is people, again, that Francis picked. And so if Francis's influence is going to weigh on this conclave, and he seemed to be pretty well respected by the majority of the voters in this conclave, then how do you form a 2/3 consensus without people who liked him and want his legacy to continue, that's where I think it does get hard for the more conservative candidates.
I like Erdo because you can say post hoc Erdo propter hoc. And it almost feels like you're back in the West Wing. That, by the way, is Latin for after this, therefore, because of this. But we did a little wordplay. It's ergo, not erdo. Simon, Matt Mitchell's probably going to cut that out. He's playing to about one other person.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what I like about this. Completely from a handicapping exercise. There is literally zero information available, right? And unless you're the, Vatican bureau chief for the New York Times or the Washington Post or the Guardian or any other international media outlet, there's no sourcing. And none of those reporters are in the conclave. And a lot of those reporters have probably never met the cardinals who are coming, because a lot of the cardinals have never met each other because they're coming from outposts. So it's almost like this is a clean slate handicapping opportunity, right? Like, how would you say you'll bet on anything. How do you even go about trying to figure out how to make an intelligent trade on this?
Well, it feels like the more I read about it, it feels like there are angles to attack with this. So that's why I'm interested to hear what Anthony's going to say about it, because it's like, it seems like people who are smart and like him have done a ton of research on this all, because I had no idea about them, having more guys outside of Europe, because what he just said is true to me, where it's just all these old guys who are all in Europe picking their buddies to be the next pope. Like, that's just always the way it's always been. So this year is interesting, right? We have a couple of long shot odds that I can't wait to hear Anthony dive into. That's like, is there good value there? Like, because we're, like you just said, it's a lot of unknown. Like, there's a lot of hearsay, taking angles because, Matt Mitchell sent us stuff about guys' body weight and his skinny popes. And it's like, I love it all. People are just grasping at straws here, but there's value that you can take these weird angles to make these weird bets. And it could be hitting a huge home run. Like, there's some crazy long shot odds here on some of these popes.
33-1. That were the odds on Francis in 2013 at one book.
Well, look,
that's
the
15th favorite.
Right. He was 33-1.
Because there had never been a pope from South America. So people were like, why would we see this guy as a favorite?
But
and
Benedict
was.
Benedict didn't have short odds. John Paul didn't have short odds. They never do. So it's almost like you need to discount the top of the board. But for purposes of housekeeping, give us like the current odds and a little bit of background on each person so people can understand what they're looking at when they go on to Kalshi and they see sort of some of these markets.
Yeah, so I'll say right now, I think there's a clear top five consensus on who the people really should be here. The favorite, and he's been kind of the favorite since the beginning, is Pietro Parolin. He's Italian. He would be considered kind of the moderate-ish version, a continuation of Francis. The main reason he's seen as the favorite, one, he has the most connections to the other cardinals, right? He's kind of been there the longest, kind of the elder statesman of the Vatican. And he was also the Secretary of State of the Vatican, which is like the deputy pope, they call him. And so he's, very close to Francis, very close to how things work in the Vatican. He's kind of the insider, moderate continuation choice. If the church could go that way, and I don't think anybody would be surprised. The second favorite is Luis Antonio Tagle, and he is they call him the Asian Francis. He's from the Philippines. There's never been an Asian pope. He is a pretty progressive guy who has spent time both at his outpost in the global south, which is, I think, an interesting part of this, developing country, kind of similar to what Francis's path was to the papacy. But he's also been in the Vatican too. So he's served in the Vatican in an administrative role as well. So he's kind of been around, and he's at 25% right now. Parolin's at 33. So those are the two favorites. I would say the buzzy dark horse that everybody likes is Pier Battista Pizzaballa, which is quite an Italian name. He's gotten a lot of juice because he got put in a really tough situation. He's a young guy who is now the first person serving in the Catholic Church in Jerusalem, which he got the job 1 week before the October 7th attack by Hamas. So he gets thrown into a war zone, basically, week one on the job, and has made a lot of positive headway and headlines and gained a lot of respect, I think, on both sides of that war because of how he's handled it. He even offered himself up as a hostage to say, trade me for these hostages. I'll, be taken in. And I think a lot of people like him. He is too young, though. And that is one thing we've seen where, like, if you're really young, the Papal Conclave is like, we don't want you to serve for 30 years. We want 8 to 10 years, and then we'll pick somebody else. Because if you pick somebody and he serves for a really long time and you don't like him, now the church has gone very far and very long without the next conclave. So it is a bit of a power grab. And then Matteo Zuppi, we talked about Erdo, he's on the mix too. Matteo Zuppi, it would be the progressive insider choice. He's the Archbishop of Bologna. He is a very close friend of Francis. They call him Don Matteo. He's well liked in those circles. Another insider choice as well.
Have you gone back and tried to calculate the average odds for, I don't even know if there were odds for John Paul or how we would find them, but what were the average odds for Benedict? What was the average odds for Benedict and Francis? And who's in that position? Because as we've said, the favorites never win. And it ends up being someone who nobody was thinking about, which I think is inherent in the process, right? Because they need a 2/3 majority, and immediately people start jockeying and peeling off votes. And again, all my knowledge about what happens in a conclave is coming from the movie Conclave, where, like someone is politicking behind the scenes. So who's in that sweet spot of odds that we should be looking at?
Yeah, so I have the last 5 papal elections, and shout out to the Smoke Filled Room Substack written by Brendan Higgins. He has done some incredible research, and honestly was a huge part of the piece writing this. So Francis was seen as 32-1. He was not the favorite. 3-1 was Benedict in 2005. He was the favorite, 25%. There were no odds listed for John Paul II or first. So they weren't even on the board, and they got picked. And that was a weird conclave because John Paul I gets elected. He dies almost immediately. There was a lot of conspiracies about that. Then John Paul II comes in right after him. He serves for almost 30 years. So they were not on the board. And then John the 23rd in 1958, he was the favorite. So this list has 10 names on the board going back to 1503, which we have odds for. Only 3 of them were favorites. And 3 of the last 4 were not seen as top of the board picks. I think if you're looking for the Benedict type candidate, the Francis type candidate, it's probably Tagle. But the thing is, we all just saw the Francis thing happen. So now everybody's kind of hypothesizing that Tagle is the new Francis. So if this were 2013, Tagle's odds would have been what Francis's odds were. But now we're kind of a little smarter to it, that they might want to look forward, and their membership in Asia has been growing pretty big in the last 10 years. So
and the Philippines is like a fighting ground in religion. So I mean, that
very Catholic too, yeah.
Yeah. So that's also another interesting part of that, where it's like that could give them a big edge in that region that they're looking for, because it's right. Like they're not that they've given up on the Western civilization like America and Canada, but you definitely see they are attacking Catholic religion, is really trying to spread. I shouldn't say attacking, spreading in Asia.
Yeah.
And Africa.
The 2 fastest growing Catholic outposts in the world. And so if the church is saying, hey, we want to, think long term here, that could be a thinking. But it's still saying, like, we're still trying to make history here by picking an African pope or by picking an Asian pope. You're still betting on something that, probably makes a lot of people in that room a little uncomfortable.
I wonder why that is. They just picked a South American pope, and that was historic. And now the makeup of the conclave is so different. And if you're thinking practically, why wouldn't you choose a pope who can represent either Asian or African nations, where you are the fastest growing, where there is a huge populace, where you have an opportunity to spread the Catholic religion when you're not making as much headway in Western civilization, as Simon points out. I prefer not to call it attacking the Asian and African continent, as Simon would, but maybe that's just his bias.
I just like, Chad, that you're shocked that the Catholic
at the end of the
Church
day.
isn't
The church cares a lot about survival. It's about growth. It's about the future.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So
But I
it
just think
doesn't
it's
make
funny,
sense
Chad,
to
that
me.
you're like shocked that the Catholic Church isn't accepting of other cultures. It's like, come on.
Oh my God. I'm not shocked at all.
Well,
Okay.
that's what makes my favorite dark horse pick interesting. John Marc Aveline. He's French, serves in Marseille. He's the Archbishop of Marseille. The story is that he was Francis's favorite bishop, but and he's kind of at the mix of all of this, right? He's European, but he's not Italian. He was born in Algeria. His family emigrated to Marseille. He's lived in Marseille forever, and Marseille is one of the most multicultural, kind of like melting pot cities in the world. The way that that country and city has dealt with poverty to migration to assimilation. So there's been so much there, and he could end up being, if they say, hey, we want a European again, but we don't necessarily want to just hand it back to the Italians, he could end up being the compromise moderate candidate who emerges, and he's at 3% right now
3%.
on Kalshi.
I think that's where I'm going to go.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go with the
Aveline.
Asian
The
guy.
thing is, the
I
French
like
have always been a
Anthony's
little
theory.
weird. They don't love the French.
They don't.
They do not love the French generally.
I don't know. It just seems to me like we got to take someone who's at the bottom of the percentage odds here. And anyone who is being publicly discussed, what's that line in the story you had? Anyone who, the next pope always walks out as a cardinal.
Yes.
So anyone who thinks they have the upper hand and is going into the conclave with the expectation that it could be them, let's take the top
Usually.
5 off the board.
Usually
Right?
doesn't happen that way. It's true.
Doesn't happen.
Yeah.
They're going to be the cardinal. They're going to stay a cardinal, and they're going to be really happy. And inside, it's going to be a knife fight. When they get out and everyone is talking about it, it's going to be, we found the right person, and we're super excited about it. And the consensus was easy because
Straight out of the
this
movie.
person represents our values. It's exactly what it's going to be. All right, Anthony, give me your plays. Then Simon, after this conversation, you are a professional bettor who's got a keen insight into psyche. I want to hear what your play is, and then I will give you mine.
Yeah, so I did take some Tagle. I do think that his popularity, his emerging markets kind of play is the most interesting angle of this entire conclave because of his opportunity. I think Africa doesn't have on paper the same consensus person that the whole continent could rally around. They're pretty split in how they're broken down, from Robert Sarah, who's more conservative, to Turkson, who's a bit more moderate, to other candidates who are more liberal. So there's more names that have emerged. But if the Asian bloc gets behind Tagle early and ends up being the clear guy, then I think it could end up happening as early as today, to be honest, with him. But Aveline's my favorite dark horse. I found the equivalent of 20-1 on him, so I took some of that. I think once you get below that, you might as well just start drawing straws. I don't know how you even come to certain conclusions on that on other candidates, but there's never been an American pope, so I would not bet on the Americans, especially given the current geopolitical climate. But you never know. Ultimately, Aveline and Tagle are the two I settled on.
Who's even like the American candidate?
Yeah, there really aren't necessarily any at the top of the board. Raymond Burke
Right?
was the number one, and he made headlines because he wanted to not allow. I don't want to get into politics, but like he didn't want to give Joe Biden communion. So like that was a whole
that's
thing. But
right.
he's at like 1%. Robert Prevost is probably the other American at the board. He's 2%. So there's a couple names, but not many.
All right, Simon, you've heard it. You're a handicapper. At the end of the day, it's a blank slate. You're not coming to this with any edge. There's no power ranking you can make. There's no model you can do. Hearing everything you've heard, chatter you've had from your Catholic Philly community, what do you got?
Well, first, I want to give props to Anthony for just smoothly listing off all these guys' names. Like, it took me forever.
Pretty
to learn
amazing.
Puka
I
Nakua,
practiced this
guy.
morning because
That makes sense.
I did a lot of reading for this, but I didn't do like that much listening. And so when you're writing the names, it's easy. But then I was like, oh shoot, like let me make
Yeah.
sure I have Pier Battista Pizzaballa pronounced correctly. Honestly, I watch a lot of soccer, so that does help with the foreign names.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, like, again, it's a rare opportunity where, Luis, the guy from the Philippines, he's the right age. Like, he's 67, I think. So to me, that's like what they're looking for. They want someone like right around that age. He's not the main guy, which I feel like you nailed it, Chad. Where like men inherently are weird and jealous creatures. And the guy who is the man of the group, he might not be the man to a lot of people, but they act like it to his face. And they wait for these type of moments that in secrecy, they can take away some of his power. This guy who thinks he's the shit, it's like, no, you're not. And we're going to give it to someone else who's more deserving. So, yeah, I just think that whole market, the fact that they're trying to spread in Asia, that just makes more sense to me to vote in a guy who seems like a good guy, seems like he's well liked. And like even just reading about him before he came on today, it's like, this guy is well traveled. Like he's done a lot in his years of service. So I didn't realize his age. To me, that's the big factor here, is the fact that he is 67, 68. Like that's a big deal when they do these votes, Chad. So yeah, I'm going with the 20%er guy. Not the greatest odds, but I'll take it.
I think I'm with Aveline. I feel
All
like
right.
I feel like he's also up there. I think he's what, 66, 67. Number one. Number two, I think if we're talking about, and if we're talking about the makeup of the conclave, still heavily European,
Yeah.
and
49%.
to them, to them, France may be Asia. And what I mean is they could be looking at this as that Asia and Africa might be one step too far. But we get a guy from Marseille, and that is a melting pot, and that has been a town in France that has been at the epicenter of what a lot of has been igniting anti-immigration sentiment in France and a lot of conflict within the country. As you can see, I'm very well read. And so I think this guy can represent something that is, not 10 degrees off center, but maybe 3 degrees off center, and to what is ultimately a very conservative body. As no matter how much we talk about liberal, moderate, progressive, and conservative, this is ultimately a very conservative body. I think he represents change given what we've seen so far. If we're playing a guy who's not even on the board, basically, who can reach a plurality of voters, who is moderate but not progressive, can be a little bit different. He's not Italian, but he's not African. I think it's him.
I would be fine with that. I got some action down on him. Like I said, he was Francis's number one friend amongst the Cardinals, amongst his favorite bishop. He seems like a really likable guy. And the one big thing politically for him is he has been very pro-immigrant, but he's been against kind of the idea of forcing mass migration onto cities. And he said, like, look what's happened in Marseille when we've tried these things. And the other big thing I think that he's really hung his hat on is communication between faiths. And we'll see what the church thinks about that. But he lives in a city where that is kind of expected and needed because of how diverse it is. There's a big Muslim population as well in Marseille. And so if that plays, if Catholicism is trying to look toward more cooperation between faiths, then he could end up being the guy.
What I like here is I paused to get a reaction from Anthony and Simon, two Catholic raised boys from the Philly area. And the first response is, Anthony, I like that. And in my head, I was thinking, oh, as a Catholic, he likes that. And then the next line was, I got some money on that. So I'm glad to see that during this enlightened, thoughtful, culturally contextualized conversation, your priorities, Anthony Dabbundo, remain the same. Anthony, listen, you did a great job breaking that down. You did a great job writing that story on The Ringer. It's fantastic. People should go check it out. Link in the description for both YouTube and the podcast link. So, in the podcast page. Well done. We're going to find out. By the time the next episode airs, we're going to know who the Pope is, and I'm super excited to see what the final resolution, what the white smoke says. Simon and I will return with our next episode of The Faith Tuesday on the Action Network YouTube page. Don't forget, also subscribe at Real Chad Millman. Download us from Spotify, Apple Pods, wherever you get your pods. Rate, review, subscribe. Leave us 5 stars. Say whatever you want. Feedback is the gift. Until next time, love you.